Today, we hope to further our efforts in spreading awareness and understanding for basic needs and security at URI. Nearly 29% of students across the nation at four-year colleges are basic needs and food insecure. My name is Andrea Heineman. I am a parent council member, and I, along with my husband, Joe Heineman, are the parents of two URI RAMs in the engineering department. And I am also the volunteer coordinator for #NoRamHungry, which last year was Share a Swipe for Hope. Today, it is my distinct honor to introduce Barbara Sweeney. Barbara is the coordinator of food security at URI and part-time faculty member in the Department of Human Development and Family Science. In this position, she is responsible for coordinating URI's basic needs pantry, Rhody Outpost, supporting individual students experiencing food and housing insecurity, and addressing overall basic needs, policies, and practices at the university. Prior to her current position, Barbara was the project manager for Interprofessional Health Initiative at URI. Barbara has earned a BS in Elementary Education, Human Development, Counseling, and Family Studies from URI in 1993, and her Master of Social Work in 1997, and Master of Public Health in 1998 from Boston University. She is a licensed clinical social worker, certified in family life, and a certified family life educator. And Barbara's kind heart and passion for helping people inspires me all the time. And so without further ado, I introduce Barbara Sweeney.
Andrea, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you to Alicia and John and everyone on the Parent Council and at the Foundation for your support of today's event and tomorrow's event as well. As Andrea mentioned, I am an alum of URI, very proud alum. My dad and husband are alums, but I'm probably most excited to take on the new role of being URI parent next year because my daughter Katie will be attending URI beginning in the fall. So I'm very excited to be taking on that role as well. I'm here to talk a little bit about food insecurity, but more globally, this idea of basic needs insecurity and what that means for college students and how you as members of the Parent Council and part of our larger community can help support our students. When we talk about food insecurity as being part of a much bigger picture. Excuse me, just needed to, there we go, I apologize, I need to adjust my screen. Part of that much bigger picture of basic needs and security. And we can define food security as, having access by all people at all times for enough food for an active and healthy life. So you can see that definition isn't just having food, being able to get food. It really talks about having food for a high quality of life. And we know that experiencing food insecurity really results from inadequate resources and can have significant effects across sort of all the spectrums, your mental, physical, and emotional health. And so when we think about what food insecurity and basic needs insecurity means for students, we not only want to think about their health, but also their academics and their cognitive performance. Next slide, please. So some of our slides will come from the Hope Center for College Community and Justice, which is located at Temple University in Philadelphia. And they define basic needs and security, they define basic needs to include food, housing, healthcare, affordable technology and transportation, two very important things for college students, resources to take care of your personal and physical needs. And having basic needs security means that we have a system in place at URI and at other universities to ensure that students' basic needs really are being met. And that's a big part of my job here at URI. And so when we think about basic needs and security, we want to think about it more as a structural characteristic or a more macro issue versus something that students have done wrong. It means we haven't built the systems or we haven't refined the systems that we need in order to keep students secure. Next slide, please. So again, just a few more details about basic needs security. I apologize, I'm just having trouble. There we go, I was having trouble with my screen. It's a big demand for students to be able to manage, students and their families to be able to cover the cost of college, as I know you're all very familiar with. So ensuring that, in particular, students are able to access the various levels of student aid available to them, and that they're consistent and especially can benefit them year after year. One of the challenges I see with students is it's very much, I'm set for this semester or I'm set for these next few weeks, but it's a constant sort of scramble in between semesters and over the summer. How am I going to find a place to live? How am I going to afford food? How am I going to afford transportation? And so they may be set, like I said, for a semester, but then they sort of start over again in January, they start over again in the summer, they start over again in September. And how can we look at ensuring that we have sustainable programs to cover them for the entire time that they're here? Go ahead, next slide, please. And so again, when we think of basic needs, that more global issue, rather than focusing specifically on food, we're talking about food insecurity, housing insecurity, and ultimately homelessness being the sort of the most severe part. In addition to food insecurity, which manifests itself in several ways at URI. I have students who come to me who use the Rhody outpost, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes, who use that every week. I have other students who come to me and say, I can't eat when I'm on campus. I don't have enough food to get through the week, or I have enough food to get through till noon, and then I'm on campus for 6 more hours and I don't have anything to eat. And I work with them to help address that issue. Well, I also work with a lot of students who are not necessarily homeless, but sort of fall definitely in housing insecurity and sort of leaning toward homelessness. So these are students who are couch surfing with a friend or multiple friends. These are students who are living in their car. These are students who, again, they might be set for the semester, but as we're wrapping up the semester, I'm getting a lot of panicked students, understandably so, saying, I can't go home for the summer. I don't have a home. I'm not sure where I can go. And never mind, I'm not sure if I can come back next semester. So it becomes a really complex issue, both the immediate of I need to get them food so they can get through each day, and then the longer term picture of how we can help students get out of that housing insecurity loop. Next slide, please. And again, when we think of basic needs, we think about not only food and housing and financial security, sort of the monetary aspects, but also this larger picture of mental and emotional and physical wellness. And I think what we've seen a lot of within my office, in the Office of Student Support and Advocacy Services, as well as around campus, is many students who are experiencing significant mental health challenges, unbelievable amounts of stress. We recently engaged in a food security survey. I worked with one of the professors in psychology and her doctoral student to assemble and distribute the survey. And the survey was just completed, so we don't have any data from it yet, but just in looking through sort of the anecdotal evidence that students provided, they really spoke very strongly about the mental health suffering, essentially, that they're going through, and the stress of not just classes that we sort of assume for students, but the stress of I don't have enough to eat. I don't know what I'm going to do at the end of the semester. And it never ends. It's just sort of this chronic kind of grinding weight on their mental health, which of course then affects their cognitive health and affects their academic performance. Next slide, please. So I really like this sort of web that describes the interplay of the effects on our basic needs security. It's not simply having enough food. We like to say no one is just hungry. You know, food insecurity is sort of a symptom or an indicator of a larger issue. And this idea that so many variables can affect a student's ability to be successful in school. Everything from, do they have a place to shower and do their laundry, which will affect their hygiene? And perhaps it may not even occur to some folks, students who don't feel like they're able to be clean and hygienic may stop coming to class. And then what does that do to their academic performance? Obviously, housing is a huge part of their basic needs, but even something like their sleep. We know college students are chronically sleep deprived. Again, if they're not living in safe and secure housing, if they're sleeping in their car or even sleeping on a friend's couch, or staying in a house, their family of origin, where they don't feel safe, and that's an issue that I hear from many students, how will that affect their sleep? Which again, how will that affect their cognition and their academic performance? So all of these pieces can be very tightly wound together, which of course makes it more complex to try to solve. Next slide, please. So when we think about which students at URI are most impacted by basic needs insecurity, this graphic comes from the University of California Global Food Initiative, but it's very much reflective of many of the students that we work with here at URI. So students who perhaps grew up in foster care, who belong to the LGBTQIA plus identity groups, are students of color, and Pell Grant recipients. And Pell Grant is, of course, a federal grant founded by our very own former senator from Rhode Island, Claiborne Pell, which is grant support to help low-income students attend college. So it makes sense that students who are perhaps coming in with fewer resources are going to struggle more when they're in college. And if you look on the right side of the graphic, as we sort of use the label non-traditional students, we can think about first-generation students who are overwhelmingly Pell Grant recipients as well. Students who are parents or older and are older. I reflect back on when my dad was a student at URI. He was that non-traditional student. He came here in his 40s when my siblings and I were all in preschool, elementary age. He had retired from the Army and received GI Bill benefits and had gone back to college, having just joined the Army right out of high school. And how challenging it was for him and for our family to manage for the four and a half years or so that he was a student. And when I first began this job, I thought, wow, we were a family that probably could have benefited from the Rhody Outpost or other services, because it was pretty lean for those years. So we know our student veterans, who of course tend to be older, might have families of their own, are a group that we want to work very closely with. And we actually have a wonderful military and veterans education center located here in the Union on the first floor. And they are fantastic. They're a great partner to work with to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our of our veteran students. Our international students are a real special group for me here at URI. The majority of the guests that use the Rhody Outpost are international graduate students. And there's a number of reasons for that. Again, more of that related to more of that basic needs and security policy level issue. Primarily, number one, it's very expensive to live here, as I'm sure everyone here knows. International students may be somewhat taken aback when they see the cost of living in this area. Most of them don't bring cars with them, understandably so, or don't get cars when they're here. So right away, their transportation is an issue. And one of or I guess two of the biggest issues is, or are, for graduate students, all graduate students receive something called an assistantship, or doctoral students receive something called an assistantship, which is payment for either teaching or research, depending on what program they're in and what college they're in. But that's meant to support one person, barely. And so if our graduate students have come here with families, right away, that puts an additional burden on their ability to sustain themselves on this assistantship. Additionally, international students, though they are here legally and have a specific kind of visa, they are not eligible for SNAP benefits, which is a supplemental nutrition assistance program, or what we used to think of as food stamps. So that's a huge sort of, again, policy level issue, that those students are eliminated from that very important benefit. That's something I would love to change tomorrow if I could, but that's really important and is directly related to why so many of the folks who use the Rhody Outpost tend to be international students. And again, just graduate students in general, be they international or domestic. There's a certain mystique about being the poor, struggling graduate student. I certainly remember that from my grad school days. But it's not romantic, and it's not, I hate to say, maybe it's not character building. Students shouldn't have to struggle to meet their basic needs while they are getting an education. But those financial burdens are one of the reasons that our graduate students in particular use the Rhody Outpost. Next slide, please. Again, this is looking at some federal data, and we asked many of the same questions on our recent food security survey here at URI. So I'll be very anxious to hear what the results are. And I don't know when we'll have that data, but it'll probably be toward the end of the summer or into the fall. But you can see the blue line represents students at two-year colleges. The red line represents students at four-year universities. So it's not really surprising that the community colleges tend to have even higher numbers of food insecurity, because we know that two-year colleges tend to enroll higher numbers of low-income students, many of whom do go on to four-year universities following that. But so the numbers are roughly, in general, if we look at one specific sort of lump sum, we say they're about 10% higher than four-year students. But you can see these are still pretty substantial numbers of food insecurity among college students. And you may be surprised when you first begin thinking about food insecurity here at URI or in colleges, because it's not something we normally associate with college students or colleges in general. And that's simply because there's usually a lot of food around at universities. Someone's always having pizza, or there's lots of food available. We think of students eating a lot in the dining halls, and that's all very true. So it even becomes a little bit more insidious because we don't assume that college students would experience food insecurity. Next slide, please. Again, similar numbers to housing insecurity, where students had to choose between paying a mortgage or paying utility bills, or only paying half of those, having their accounts go into collections, having to move in with others. So again, that couch surfing, or sort of begging a friend to let them stay for a bit, doubling, tripling, quadrupling up in a house that's really meant for a smaller number of residents. So again, we see two-year students at two-year colleges having higher numbers than students at four-year colleges. Next slide, please. And here's the big number we've been using here at URI from our most recent food security survey prior to the one we just completed earlier this month. And we had hit around 13%. So obviously, this number is a little bit dated. It says spring 19, but it may have even been the year before that. It was definitely prior to COVID. So, sort of all bets are off when we think about the effects of, what COVID has done as far as food security goes. But one of the challenges with this number is at the time, a lot of the students who responded tended to be first and second year students. And the challenge with that is most of our first and second year students live on campus. And so they may not experience food insecurity in the way that we think of it, because they do have to have a dining plan in order to live on campus. So we worked really hard with this survey to make sure that we hopefully got a really broad group of respondents, and not that they only surveyed first and second year students before. They definitely surveyed them across the spectrum. It may have just been a little bit heavier weighted toward those first and second year students. And I don't want to make it seem like students who live in dorms and have dining plans also don't experience food insecurity. because I do certainly work with some of those students, they tend to be in smaller numbers, at least during the academic year, again, because they have a meal plan. We certainly have students who have issues with eating in dining halls, who don't like the food, and we'll work to support any student, but in terms of having access to food, it's not so much of an issue for our first and second year students during the academic year. Next slide, please. So this is where we really get into the part of the presentation that I love, because we begin looking a little bit more at the Rhody outpost. And I began this position at the end of May last year. So just sort of when our college summer was starting. We know that our summer begins in mid-May or so after graduation, or the third week in May. So I began tracking from June onward. And obviously we can see there's been a tremendous rise in utilization of the Rhody outpost since I took over last year. And I think there's several reasons for that. One is it's naturally quieter on campus in the summer. There's not as many students around. Those who are around do tend to be the graduate students who, especially those who are living over in Grad Village on 138, who tend to be doctoral students, and they're here year round. They're actually here for usually 5 or 6 years because that's the length of their program. So their need sort of happens all year round. But in addition to that, you'll notice we hit a big increase in October, a small one in September, or a moderate one in September when the rest of the students came back, but a large one in October. And that's because we moved the location of the Rhody outpost. We used to be up at St. Augustine's Church on Lower College Road. And they were wonderful partners, and we love them, and we still partner with them. But we knew we needed a bigger space with more access to cold food storage, fridge and freezer. And that's where URI Dining Services really have given us our new home. So we're located in the back of the Dining Services office, which is where the warehouse is, which is kind of a funny location for a food pantry, but it's worked out beautifully, and Dining Services could not be a more wonderful partner for us in terms of the support they've given us, from space to regular donations of food that that they can't use or just not appropriate for them to use, but it's within code, it's perfectly acceptable, and we're always their first thought if they have excess food, and I so appreciate that. In addition to that, I'm able to order food through the warehouse, through the staff that runs the warehouse. We pay for it through our funding, but it's just a huge convenience factor that I can order produce and bread and dairy products and through the warehouse. It just makes it a lot easier for me. So our numbers have stayed steady and even continuing to rise as we've moved into the spring. So February, and I'm not sure why, but February was our busiest month. The most we've served in one day is about 88 students, and that's in one afternoon, on Friday afternoons. We normally hit somewhere between about 70 and 78 students on a Friday. I may serve 1 or 2 outside of that time period, but for the most part, it's Friday afternoon. Next slide, please. So just a couple of pictures of the Rhody outpost, and I know it can be a bit off-putting when you see the warehouse floor and the cage, the chain link fence sort of there. And the reason why that fencing was in place has nothing to do with us. The warehouse used to store alcohol in there because the catering department will often serve beer and wine at different events, and they just needed to have somewhere they could put it behind lock and key. They had stopped doing that. It's been secured elsewhere, and so the space was available. There was already fridge and freezer in there, as you can see, sort of in the center of the screen, and it's been a perfect space. I actually had some students from Professor Regina Bell's class down earlier helping me clean and organize it, so it actually looks much better than it does in this picture. But you can see, in the left picture, we have a variety of produce that we like to put out. We use the baskets from the warehouse, from the catering side, which just makes it look a little bit nicer. We have bread that we order, and then you can see the milk and eggs and yogurt in the fridge. You'll happen to notice that the shelf right next to the fridge is our sort of personal hygiene, household needs space. We carry toilet paper, paper towels. We have down on the bottom shelf, you'll see menstrual products, which is a sort of a huge need, the concept of period poverty. that students who are menstruating can't necessarily afford to purchase the supplies they need. So we're very happy to be able to carry them within the outpost, as well as shampoo, conditioner, soap, sort of the usual things, whatever we can get through donations. And those are incredibly important to students too. You all know how expensive it is just to go and stock up for a month with your health and beauty aids, at Target or Walmart, drop $50 to $75 pretty easily doing that. So if we can offer those things to students as well, it just leaves a little bit more money in their pockets. What you can't see in the picture, sort of to the left of where the personal products are, again, your typical food pantry items, canned goods, peanut butter when we can get it, although interestingly, because we serve so many international students, peanut butter is a little bit less popular. We have rice, pasta, canned tomato products, all of the things you would just expect to see at a food pantry. And I would say that anyone who's interested in seeing the Rhody Outpost, you are more than welcome to contact me, and I would love to give you a tour so you can see how it looks today. We're always trying to spiff it up just a little bit. And we do also have wonderful produce that we're starting to get from URI's farms. It's great being a land grant institution where we have working scientific farms. So Dr. Brown and her students are actually growing things in the greenhouse right now. And I just picked up about 9 big bins full of greens that they grew in the greenhouse that we are so happy to be able to share with our students. And then as the summer progresses and they're actually growing things outside, we again will reap the benefit of that. So it's a great partnership that we have. Next slide, please. And just to run down a couple of things that we're doing that go sort of beyond the Rhody Outpost, I just want to highlight that we don't do this work alone. It all is because of the partnerships that we've made both on campus and in the community. So I'll go through just a couple of those on the next slide. Oh, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I mentioned the food security survey that came out earlier this month. We'll be anxious to get the results of that. We have our Students Helping Students events that we'll be talking about today and tomorrow. Rhody Rotation, which is a student-led initiative to develop kind of an on-campus thrift receptacle, if you will, where students can they can donate items and they can come in and take items, no money changes hands. It's a way to not only ensure that students can perhaps get some new clothes, get household items, plates, cups, small appliances, especially our international students. When they move here, they don't necessarily bring an entire household worth of items with them because they simply can't. No money will change hands, and it will also, in our efforts for environmental sustainability, we're keeping things out of the dumpsters and out of the landfill. So I'm so excited that we can be part of that. We have a free farmers market that the Department of Nutrition organizes with dining services and the farms. So all that produce that Dr. Brown and her students pick, it's distributed every week for free on campus. There's no means testing. Anyone can get it. Students, faculty, staff, just go on up and grab a bag. It was amazingly successful last year, and we're looking forward to doing it again this year. I just want to highlight a couple more because I know our time is moving on. I mentioned, or we'll be hearing more about the idea of Meaningful Mondays and donations that students can make. We'll actually have the Meaningful Monday app open tomorrow, even though it's Thursday, and that's an opportunity for students to donate $5 dining dollars if they have them. So any student on a flex plan or on a regular meal plan should have dining dollars available to them. And they can donate $5, no more, no less. It's through the Grubhub app. And I really love that because one thing students will say to me is, I wish I could help, but I don't know how, or I don't have the resources to help. And while $5 may certainly be too much for certain students, and we understand that, for others, they say, yep, that's no problem. I get $45 a week. I can absolutely donate $5. And it gives them an opportunity to know that they're part of the solution and they're helping their fellow students. That money gets put into a pot that I can then redistribute to students who come to me who don't have food. So I can put them on a flex plan, or I can put money on their RAM account. Our Students First Fund, which I help oversee, and which the foundation very wonderfully manages for us, again, houses those funds where I can provide direct assistance to students. And year-round housing is something I would love to have. It's an issue that, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, students might be secure for the fall and the spring, and even in between semesters now that students can stay here. It's really the summer where we begin to see students who say, it's not safe for me to go home. My parents won't accept me back at home. Very often that's connected to issues of their gender expression or their sexual orientation. They say, I don't have a home to go to anymore. I don't feel safe going home. And how can we help support them in summer housing? And even with summer housing and Housing and Residential Life is a wonderful partner. There's a couple weeks at the end of the summer where all the dorms have to be closed to get them prepped for the fall. So we have 2 weeks where I tell students, I'm so sorry, I have nowhere to put you. And those students sometimes stay in a hotel. They sometimes go home even though they don't feel safe. They couch surf, they sleep in their car. They get very creative, but I wish they didn't have to get so creative. I wish we had a solution to that. So next slide, please. Again, I won't go through every partner, but and I'm sure I'm forgetting probably a million partners, but these are just some of the groups on and off campus that we work with. I highlighted dining services again because they've given us a home and they've just been wonderful. St. Augustine's, St. Peter's by the Sea, who also has a food pantry, a community market on Friday afternoons that our students can access. The food is delivered to URI because many of our students don't have transportation to get into Narragansett. And I appreciate the members of Greek Life because every Friday, one of the houses sends 3 or 4 of their members over to pick up that food. And it's a small thing, and I don't mean to make it seem like it's not important. It's an hour out of their time, and they're so happy to do it. It makes such a huge difference for me because then I don't have to drive into Narragansett on Friday afternoon when I'm trying to run the outpost. So it's those little pieces. The students who came in this morning and helped clean the outpost for me, they spent about a half an hour, but what a difference it made for me. So I appreciate all of those small efforts and large efforts to support us, but just driving from campus to Narragansett and back like sort of saves the day every Friday. And just all of the different initiatives within URI, within the foundation, virtually all the academic colleges have contributed to the Rhody Outpost. I had many sort of individual champions among the faculty in different colleges, which just makes my job so much easier and makes it a joy to work with, because all I hear from people is, tell me what you need and how can I help? And I so appreciate that. And I think we'll wrap up with one more slide, 2 more slides. If you'd like to know how you can help us, we gratefully take donations of specific items. Gift cards are incredibly helpful because I can turn those right around. I can go to the store and buy stuff that I know we need. I know there's a link in here for our updated request form, and I believe that'll be in the chat as well. You can follow us on URI Food Security on Instagram, and please shout us from the rooftops. My goal is to be the worst kept secret on campus. I do hear from a lot of students and faculty, I had no idea you existed. So I want to try to remedy that and make sure that everyone knows we exist. And if we go to the next slide, I think that will tell you where you can donate. So there's sort of 3 places you can donate. The first is our office, if you will. The Rhody Outpost is located in the Dining Services Distribution Center at 10 Tuttle Road. Please don't put that into your phone because it will bring you to the Ryan Center for map reasons that I don't understand. We're on the other side of West Alumni Avenue, closer to Flag Road. If you drive around to the rear of the building to the warehouse entrance is where you'll find us. Friday afternoons or Fridays are great times to donate because I'm there all day Fridays, but if you reach out to me, we can make other arrangements. St. Augustine's Church has a wonderful shed, and we'll hear about that from Jack in just a few moments. But there's a fantastic shed, 24/7 access. So it's great if you're coming on or off campus and think, oh, I got that bag of food in my car, I want to donate it. You can just put it right in there. And that's checked several times a week. And finally, one of my offices is located in the Union in the Dean of Students suite on the 3rd floor. And there's a bin here. I don't need to be here. You're welcome to just come on in and drop it in the bin. You just walk straight through the door. You'll see it up ahead on your left. And I think that is our last slide. And so now I'm sure we have some questions or comments.
Barbara, thank you so much for that great presentation. I really loved the graphics, and some of those visuals just made it so very, such an important perspective for us. I really appreciate all your hard work, Barbara.
Thank you.
So right now we have questions, and we have one that's already in the chat. And so if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A chat now. And I should also mention that today's presentation is being recorded, and that we will also have some links available for you. So one question we have now is there a volunteer time donation back to RI Now by the users?
Just gonna look at that question.
Is there a volunteer time donation back to RI Now by the users? Perhaps they're wondering if there's a time frame.
Well, we specifically use volunteers on Fridays. That's the day we're open right now at the Outpost. I'm looking to expand that over the summer. So I have volunteers who come in the morning to help set up, as well as volunteers during our hours of operation, which at the moment are 3 to 5:30 on Friday afternoons. Again, looking to expand that. So for sort of hands-on work, those are the times. I would also love more volunteers who could help me with pickups, help me with shopping. So if you have different flexibility throughout the week, I would absolutely love to talk to you. And I promise you, we will find a place for you. And once you start, I never let you leave either.
Okay, there's another question. Is there a priority need food supply list you post to those interested in donating?
Mm-hmm. And
know what to that asking you know, what they need to know to provide for.
Absolutely, thank you. I do keep a running list on a Google Doc, so whenever I update, you get the most updated version. That was in the PowerPoint, and I do believe that Alicia will, if it's not linked in the chat, oh, thank you so much, Alicia. And will also be linked in the recording if you're not able to get it right now, as well as if you go on the Rhody Outpost website. So there's lots of ways you can get that. And I try to update that about once every 2 weeks, although our needs stay pretty standard all year round, really. We generally need a lot of the same things.
Thank you, Barbara. And also, you know, if you'd like to make a monetary donation, you can go to the Student First Fund, and there's a link provided for that. And I believe that's on the Rhody Outpost page too, isn't it, Barbara? Is there a link to the Student First Fund?
There's not a link to the Student First Fund directly from directly from the Rhody Outpost, but if you go on the foundation website, and I do believe Alicia will have it here as well, that brings you directly to the Student First Fund.
Right.
There can be a couple clicks, but she has it set where you can just, oh, thank you, Jackie, where you can just kind of click right to Rhody Outpost.
Great, thank you for that. Right, I think we have a couple more questions. Do you make accommodations for those students with religious observations?
Most definitely. Many of our students in the last 4 weeks or so have been honoring or celebrating Ramadan. Although I haven't seen a big change in their usage of the Rhody Outpost. But for example, we know that many of them are fasting during the day, so we would offer opportunity. We always have sort of snacks and treats that are there that are provided by either TLC coffee roasters as well as the parishioners at St. Augustine's. They bring treats with them every week, and we offered students an opportunity where they could wrap them up, take them to go in order to honor their fast until iftar that night. I've had requests for kosher food. When we were carrying chicken, I've stopped carrying it because of the cost. We were purchasing it through the warehouse, but the chicken was halal. And many of our observant Muslim students expressed their appreciation that we were able to provide that, because it is expensive and it can be difficult to get, particularly if you don't have transportation.
All right, at this point, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but thank you all for your important questions. You know, this is a challenge that faces so many of our students every day. And Barbara, thank you for answering and fielding those. At this point in the presentation, I want to tell you about an event that we're having tomorrow on the quad. It's Earth Day on the quad, and hashtag No Ram Hungry is a part of that event. And I am the parent representative and volunteer coordinator for that. And my son Jack is the student representative for this event. And it's a wonderful event where we get to interact with students passing by. We get to show them how to use the Grubhub app, how they can make donations, how they can help us spread awareness. We have virtual toolkits that we've been disseminating, and it's a wonderful example of spreading awareness and interacting, and it's on a beautiful day. So on that day, you know, we're really hoping to raise funds, raise awareness, bring more people into the fold, and do the best we can for our fellow Rams in need. I'd also like to, so that's Earth Day on the quad, hashtag No Ram Hungry, 10 to 2, you see it all right there. At this point, I'm also going to introduce my son Jack's video. Jack, before he came to the University of Rhode Island for his Eagle Scout project, he built a food receptacle for Rhody Outpost, who really just had a little bin that they accepted at St. Augustine's Church. So Jack's job was to clean it up and make a food receptacle that was a shed-sized receptacle where they could accept more donations. So when my husband and I came to the parent council, you know, they asked us where we saw ourselves contributing, and we thought, oh, well, we'd like to build on Jack's Eagle Scout project. And that's what brought us to Share a Swipe for Hope, which is now hashtag No Ram Hungry. So there we go. There's Jack.
Hello, I'm Jack Heineman, and I'm a third-year civil engineering student at the University of Rhode Island. Thank you for including me in this important discussion. I was also an Eagle Scout at Troop 138, West Kingston, Rhode Island. It is through my Eagle Scout project in 2020 that I became aware of the basic needs insecurity at URI and across the nation. My Eagle Scout project was to build a larger food receptacle for Rhody Outpost to accept more donations. Since then, we have grown in our partnership with Rhody Outpost, Share a Swipe for Hope, and now, hashtag No Ram Hungry. It is my hope to spread awareness to more students on how we can come together as a community to help. Join us on campus on Earth Day event, hashtag No Ram Hungry, Students Helping Students, on Thursday, April 20th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for listening today. And on this last slide here, you're going to see more information about the Parent Council, which was the real vehicle that helped us further our efforts and spreading awareness for hashtag No Ram Hungry. So we look forward to seeing you out on the quad. We thank you for your questions. We thank you for your interest and your support. Special thank you to Barbara Sweeney and to John Garcia and Alicia Johnson, who has jumped into this role for hashtag No Ram Hungry. And we're just really looking forward to making this event even better.